treatment and what is the best place to go for the care that is needed. We know that you want.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning and welcome to America's Web Radio, and this is David's Pick, and we have a very special guest, as we always do, and courtesy of Rick White at the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, and Rick has become a very good friend, and we have Mr. Bill Howell here today with us, and he's going to be talking about his service. But before we get started, we're going to do what we've done the past couple of weeks, and that's just take one moment of silence to honor our veteran brothers and sisters that need a moment of prayer or need a moment of thoughtfulness from all of us. All our brothers and sisters that have served. And we just take a brief moment to think about our veterans that need help. And whether you're a veteran or you've got a friend that's a veteran and needs a moment of silence, we're here for you. And if you've got somebody you'd like to dedicate a show to, just drop me an email, David at America's Web Radio, and we'll be glad to take a look at who you want us to dedicate a show to and give us some of their background and what they did in the military, past, present, and we even encourage our young folks to look at the military for a career. So with that being said, let's just take a quick moment to think about how grateful we are to have the best veterans in the world and what they have done for us in the past. Okay, we've got the camera on Bill, and we're glad to have him here. And thanks. Bill, welcome to America's Web Radio.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
We look forward to hearing your story and what you were involved with during Vietnam, and it's sort of a different side of things that a lot of folks don't realize. You know, as I was going through basic and AIT out in Fort Ord, California, which is a beautiful, beautiful place to take a 6-month vacation. But, you know, they kept telling us that, for everyone in country, there were 5 behind that person in country supporting him in one shape, form, or fashion. And I never considered myself that active, but I guess I was in the reserves and served in light arms infantry, mechanized infantry out in Texas, and then I moved to Atlanta and joined. And it's my kind of thing. I joined and then they were dissolved, but it was a civil affairs unit, Army. I went from National Guard to Army, and talking about people scratching their head in the civil affairs unit. They were like everybody else. They'd take you if you were walking and breathing, but they didn't know what to do with 11 Bravos. So there I stood with my my hair long and my fingernails short, and we finally figured out that because I could type, and that's the best thing I ever did in my life was learn how to type, and I learned on an old manual, so an electric was like a toy almost, and I could type, and so they had all sorts of jobs for me as a company clerk as it wound up. But anyway, I did not serve in Vietnam, and like I've said many times recently, they have changed it, and they call it the Vietnam era, and I spell it E-R-R-O-R, and they spell it E-R-A, so there is a question of spelling, but I'm thankful for my service, and I'm thankful for that I got through it, and it was I met so many nice people, and until recently there was sort of a negativity to being in the reserves and so forth, but now ARs and NGs that did serve are accepting everybody. And I know you're quite active in the Johns Creek Veterans Association, and Mike Mazzell is the president of the organization. And tell us what Johns Creek has done that puts them on the map.
You're talking about Johns Creek Veterans Association, JCVA, is this called?
Yeah.
Before I start, David, I'd just like to dedicate this program to our treasurer, Johns Creek Veterans Association. His name is Rick Beggs, of course, a veteran. He's now in Northside Hospital, and he's being treated for probably 4 weeks, as he estimates. And our prayers go out to Rick Beggs, especially with Johns Creek Veterans, and everybody, for both him and his wife, Kathy. So I dedicate this program to Rick Beggs.
Certainly, and we're glad to know that, and our thoughts and prayers will be with him. And
Great.
I had done this for my friend J. Roy that was having surgery a couple of weeks ago, and I'm glad to report that tough old Texan came through the surgery way better than they expected, and he had a goodly portion of his tongue removed, and then they had reconstruction surgery, and they expected him to be in rehab for many weeks and or many months to learn how to talk again. But he's a good whiskey drinker, and you're not going to slow him down too much, and so they didn't cut the tip of his tongue off, and he's already beginning to speak. And
Great.
I'm very
Great.
thankful, and J. Roy is a good friend of mine, and we're blessed that he's still with us, and Agent Orange didn't get him like it's gotten a lot of folks.
Yep.
And it was bad stuff. Oh, and I want to put a plug in too. I don't generally get this political, but the fact of the matter is, I can't help but be political today, and we've endorsed President Trump since the get-go, and since he ran the first time, and now he's running again. And for you folks that don't understand this or don't realize, this deal of him saying something bad about the military is baloney, absolute baloney. And he has supported the military. I was in Hawaii and almost broke down crying. My son was stationed there for a while, and he took me out on the tarmac, and there were beautiful jet fighters lined up in a row that were being cannibalized. This was during the Biden-Obama administration when they gutted our military, and they were to stay in the air. They were having to cannibalize and get parts for enough planes to stay in the air. And it was just heart-rending to see this. And as soon as Trump came in, he turned it around. He loves the military. He certainly doesn't hate it. And one of the biggest accomplishments, and I know, Bill, you can appreciate this as well, was the signing of the Blue Water Bill.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the Navy and Coast Guard that were in Vietnam and got sprayed by Agent Orange, they had been denied their rights.
That's right.
And as soon as Trump gets into office, he signs the Blue Water Bill, giving the naval personnel and the Coast Guard personnel the same rights and privileges that men in country, the Army and Marines and everybody else that got hit by Agent Orange. It gave the Navy and Coast Guard the same rights, which they certainly deserved. They got Agent Orange didn't discriminate whether you were on a boat on shore or next to the shore or inland. And, folks, we've got in my opinion, we've got a good president, and we need to keep him. We can't afford something like Biden coming in and gutting our military again. We're on too slippery a slope to chance anything like that. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind where you get this information and the source that it comes from, like that Trump doesn't like the military, because he does. Anyway, with that being said, we didn't bring Bill in here to talk about politics today, but sometimes you have to say what you got to say, you know. And again, Bill, welcome to America's Web Radio, and we're going to talk about your service during Vietnam and your part and your role in the Johns Creek Veterans Association,
Okay.
and in also the Georgia Military Veterans Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. I knew I could get it out.
Well,
It's just
thanks.
a matter of getting it out. I get messed up every time I wash my hair, you
A
know.
lot of acronyms.
Yeah. But so tell us about, you went to Cornell?
Yes,
And
Cornell ROTC program. That's where I got my commission in 1969.
And that was still in the heat of the battle.
Oh, very much so. All of our cadre were Vietnam veterans. Again, this is 1969. And again, initially in 65, we had no Vietnam experience in our cadre, our teaching professors of military history. And by 1967 and 8, and definitely by 1969, we had the key experience of having Vietnam veterans, talk to us. Made a whole big difference about our outlook about the war and how to prepare for it.
Oh, yeah. You know, it was like we had never, and even in Korea, it wasn't a jungle situation, and we were totally unprepared. Just you know, and
Totally.
what's funny is General Richard Dix is a good friend of mine and
too.
has
Yep.
been on many times, and you know. That was just the opposite of Vietnam, and we weren't prepared for the desert.
That's right.
And we were sending green tanks over, and I happened to go to Fort Stewart.
Green tanks.
And they were spraying everything in sight, going from green tanks and green APCs to sandy brown desert
Camo.
routes. So, you know, and this is, you wonder, I love the military, and and my son's in intel, and you wonder how could you, and you know, the line was, well, we were preparing for war in Europe, so we had green, everything was green. Well, yeah, but I mean, hello, the sand in the desert's a little bit different, and how well does green stand out in the desert? And they found out. And the same way when we went into Nam, we were totally unprepared for jungle warfare. And I guess between Polk and Fort Ord, where I went, they were probably the only two bases or forts that had somewhat similar. You got some kind of training with it, but you know, one of the, and I have to laugh, and you know. It's sort of like we won in spite of ourselves, and same way with World War II. One of the great historians said that you know, the Germans didn't stand a chance because we didn't do anything like they figured we would, and so we've fought a lot of battles like that. But going into Nam with the open end of the M16 is the flash suppressor, and it was getting hung up on bushes and everything else.
Terrible.
And it was. So let's talk about Bill. What were you doing besides becoming an officer? And I guess I should be standing as I speak to you, but
Baloney.
anyway. So what did you do?
And
Well, okay, you graduate from Cornell.
got my commission.
Got your
Spent
commission.
1 year postgraduate work at Cornell and entered the Army in June 1970 in Fort Benning, where we had 6 weeks of basic officer infantry training. And then you went to your permanent assignment, which was Fort Campbell, Kentucky. As a training officer, like we all were, I went through a class at Fort Benning of probably 120 officers, all fresh college graduates, and some got the assignment at Fort Ord, which I hated those people, like you, and I wound up in the middle of nowhere, Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Yeah, Fort Ord was great.
Yep. And
Carmel and Monterey were pretty nice too.
oh, how nice!
Yeah.
Tell me all about it.
Well, I tell you what, Carmel, had an attitude.
Oh,
Monterey
yeah.
didn't,
Oh,
but
yeah.
Carmel
Oh, yeah,
did.
Carmel did.
And a good friend and I, and we're still best friends, as a matter of fact, met in Fort Ord, and he had gone to Texas Tech like I did. And we made reservations we had a weekend coming up and made reservations in Carmel, and got to our motel room, and the guy wouldn't let us, he wouldn't honor our reservations because of our haircuts.
Oh,
And you might say I blew up.
you did?
Yeah. But they wouldn't honor our reservations because we were military. And, I couldn't believe it.
Amazing.
But
Amazing.
that was in, that would have been in 1970.
70? Uh-huh.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I just, and that's, it was not a nice scene. I'm glad I didn't get to see the inside of a wall,
Yeah, local jail.
Yes.
Mhm.
But I couldn't believe that they would have that kind of attitude.
Amazing.
And as all I could tell was my money was green, and
Uh-huh.
what.
Well, today, Carmel's one of the richest per capita towns in the country.
But such is life. So let's get back to
So
Bill.
back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I signed up for a 6-year obligation as a reserve officer. So I had 2 years of active duty, 2 years of standby or ready reserve, and 2 years of standby reserve. So I entered in 70, so I got it in 75. And for the first 2 years, I was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky as a training officer. And as they promised me, as I trained 6 years for, I did nothing but prepare for Vietnam all through ROTC, postgraduate year, in my first year at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I interviewed everybody who talked to me about the Vietnam War, because the stuff they taught us, again, was old school. I swear, in my first 3 years of ROTC, they were teaching us conventional warfare. Only in my last year did we have some veterans, returnees, that could talk about the war and the tactics that were used. Ones that were successful or, in many cases, totally unsuccessful. And again, so that's 1 year of training, Vietnam, of the 4 years. So in my postgraduate work, I volunteered in audited courses in their ROTC program, as I was taking postgraduate classes and working for Cornell. And so in the next year at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, they promised us one thing. They promised me, you would get to Vietnam, because that's all I wanted to do. And lo and behold, in April 1971, I finally got my orders to Vietnam. And at that point, they gave us a 2-week leave. Again, all this reserve officers. And I got my 2-week leave, and we got married to my fiance, had a nice honeymoon in Bermuda, and returned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky to prepare to be bused to Charleston, South Carolina, to be flown to Fort Sherman in the Panama Canal Zone for 2 weeks of jungle training, real jungle training, in June. 10 days before June 12th, our orders were canceled because of the troop cutbacks in the active peace talk negotiations. They pulled back the reserve officers and only gave the regular Army officers, who were green, no experience in Vietnam, they gave those guys with a 4-year active duty obligation or career, like many West Pointers I served with, they gave them the opportunity to go to Vietnam. So after 6 years of training for the Vietnam, my orders were canceled. I spent the next year doing some advanced work at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And again, I had enough of training the basic trainees, and they gave me the special assignment of processing back the entire 173rd Airborne Brigade, which is Rick White's unit, one of many-time guests of your show. And I've told this story to Rick, and I finally discovered last night my document that I haven't read in 49 years about my service processing back the entire 173rd Airborne Brigade. And I've never read this in 49 years. I didn't know I even had it. I only have one copy, so I made a copy for this show. And it's the proudest moment of my military history. Again, 4 years of ROTC, postgraduate work.
Now,
my
would
6-year
that have
reserve
been in
obligation.
your? Would that have been in your 201?
Yes. It's dated September 9th, 1971, and it talks about my experience processing back the entire 173rd Airborne Brigade, right from the fields of Vietnam. Just before I read it, because I haven't read it in 49 years, I was given the assignment. I was assigned to take over the main hangar at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, a huge hangar. You could put a couple of cargo airships inside. And they gave me a squad, and they gave me medical people, screening people, a psychologist, and military policemen, of course, and some military dogs. And I was in charge. They gave me this raw second lieutenant, the responsibility of processing back 3,200 troops from the 173rd Airborne Brigade, known as the Thundering Herd, right, Rick White? And the Thundering Herd were a nasty-looking bunch of people when they hopped off that plane. Before I read this, my only clear memory was a soldier getting off that plane. The moment he hopped down those steps, he kissed the ground. He was the only guy who saw this. He did a push-up, kissed the ground, did another push-up, and walked up to me and goes, he looked at me with my gold bar second lieutenant. This guy still had mud in his boots, right from the field. He looked at me and goes, left-handed salute, and he goes, which way to the phones? I said, there's a bank of phones I've set up all for you guys, because that's all you want to do is call your loved ones the moment you get off the cargo plane. He said to me, get out of my way. I'm coming through. And I better believe I hopped. And then he said to me over his shoulder, what are those dogs for? I said, because I knew what he was after. And I said, those are screening dogs. That's all I was taught to say, because the MPs were right there. He said, get those MF dogs and MF policemen out of my sight. And I said, okay, go to the phones. I'll do what I can. And then we had a long talk with the head of the military police unit and said, these guys are out of the field. They've flown for 18 hours. And all they want to do is be in contact with their loved ones. Who are we to screen these people for drugs? Because they've already been screened as they exited Vietnam. And that's how we're going to welcome them back to the States? By busting them for marijuana they had in their pockets? And I convinced the military police unit to dismiss the unit. And for the next 6 weeks, I never saw, which is the term of the processing operation, I never saw a military policeman.
That's great. That's great. And you would have thought that we would have welcomed with open arms our veterans coming back, but that was not the attitude. No. Unfortunately, we have some of that attitude today, and it's wrong.
It is.
You know, I look at the people that are doing the problems today, and the folks that were involved in the problems of the late 60s and early 70s, and I look at the ones that did serve. We all raised our hand. We all took the same oath. And even though my service was basically basic and AIT infantry, but, you know, the thing is, you can't go through that and not learn discipline. And I even today, I don't have flashbacks. I just, every now and then it'll hit me that, you know, when I was going through AIT and stuff, you'd say, why in the world are we doing this? But the Army, the Navy, the Marines, all of them, there's a reason for everything you do. And it's a lot of it's discipline, and a lot of it's, you know, over 200 years of shaping and forming the military. They know what they're doing. And they know the psychology of it. And although we weren't in many ways trained to go into Vietnam or trained to go into the Middle East from an area type standpoint, but from a troop standpoint, we were able to adapt quickly, and that's what discipline and what the military trains. And if these guys that are doing this Molotov cocktail crap in Portland and all of this stuff. You jerk them up and put them into the military.
Yes.
And you'd have men that were good men coming out, not crap like you got in Portland and Seattle and around the country now. And, the military is, as I say every week, the largest fraternity and sorority in the world. And everybody comes out a brother and a sister out of the military.
Oh, yeah.
And,
very true.
And I encourage parents that are listening, grandparents, kids, just recent graduates, look at some branch of the military for a career. It's a great. My son's doing fantastic. He loves it, and it's just been very good for him. And he's been a good kid. We never had a disciplinary problem with him, but at all. And now he's just that much more of a man.
Yep. Very true.
So, with that being said, we sort of take a break, but we do live breaks during this show, and it is that, I tell you what, I'm going to put you on the spot, Bill. Do a sales pitch for JC Veterans Association.
Well, that was your first question before I interrupted you and said this program is dedicated to Rick Beggs. And so back to your first question was, what does Johns Creek Veterans Association do for Johns Creek? And basically, I can give you my top 2 reasons. I'm sure Mike Mizell and all the other board of directors have their own reasons or a list. But my 2 favorite things that they do. They provide an organization, a friendly social organization for all veterans. All branches, all experiences, everybody's welcome.
Oh, that's true because they let a guy in called Submarine Mike.
Oh my gosh,
so
crazy Mike.
They'll accept anybody.
Well, Mike was the guest last week, and I listened to his program twice on your show, and he is delightful, and he's amusing, and he's also very informative to a limit because he can't talk about speed and
depth.
There you go, Mike, because I'm sure Mike's watching. So, where were we?
Johns Creek.
Yeah. So the social organization aspect is number 1. It's our meetings, our events, our dinner meetings once a month, our luncheons once a month are purely social. It gives these guys a chance to bond, tell their stories, and we're all good listeners.
Well, wait a second. There's one question that I ask every veteran guest that I have here. Have you ever met or do you know a veteran that can only tell one story?
Oh, many. The problem is,
no. You didn't understand what I said.
They don't tell enough stories.
No, I said, have you ever met one that can only tell one story?
Absolutely, tons.
One?
I'm telling you the truth. That's my truth.
I'm
talking about Vietnam War.
I'm talking about a veteran across the board. I have never met a veteran that can just tell you one story. Maybe 100 stories.
I flat disagree.
But
my problem is in my 50 years since Vietnam, my active duty service, I cannot get people to talk about Vietnam and their experiences enough, including my 3 favorite people. My cousin, who served 3 terms in the fast boat in Mekong. 2
Delta.
rotations. Pardon me, Mekong.
Delta.
Yeah, the Mekong Delta. And Mekong River. He actually went upriver. My cousin, who served 2 tours as a Marine up north. And my brother, best man brother, who served 3 tours on an aircraft carrier, supporting F-4s, F-105s, Thuds over Vietnam. And none of these people, 50 years later, will talk about their experiences. So my mission before I go is to, and again, I've got a good head start with all 3 of them. I've made the dent to get them to document and either at least tape their stories, write them down, anything. Send me an email, because I'm not gathering material for each one of them, so I can put them in. I have files so that when they go, their families, their descendants, their heirs will have some idea what they did in Vietnam.
Well, now,
and that's my problem, Dave. I can't get people to talk about Vietnam. It's rare I can get anybody to talk even 2 stories about combat in their experience in Vietnam.
Well,
besides the fluffy stories.
When I say
I'm talking about real stories, not the fluff stories about, I got drunk and here's what I did in R&R.
Yeah, well, that's mainly what I was talking about. Is that it's like Submarine Mike has many stories that he can talk about.
That's what I love.
And it's not necessarily about what he did during Vietnam. It's just, I have my stories of AIT and
me too. Yes.
And most vets, once they and the meeting that I went to at Johns Creek, sitting at a table with Submarine Mike and some others, we were kidding about everyone had a story, at least one, and most of them had hundreds of stories.
Well, they do inside, but they don't document it for their heirs.
Yeah,
there's no record. That's the problem, Dave. They have no record. They have no documentation.
Yeah. Well,
so as a historian, which I am, I'm all over my brother and my cousins, to document the stories because they served way above board in the Vietnam War. So that's the problem, getting them out and getting them to document it. And the problem is these guys are all in their 70s, like we are, and we're not guaranteed of having clear memories 10 years from now, are we, Dave?
Well, it's my father was naval commander in Intel, and he wouldn't talk about his service per se, but
That's right.
he had a few stories and incidents that happened, and friends of his, and even after, many years after, we would we'd always take a long vacation, and many of those times were going back and meeting his friends that he had made in the Navy,
Great.
And we particularly coming from Texas, and we'd go up north into northeast part of the United States, and many of his friends had retired.
That's my country.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway,
so back to the social aspect about stories. The best thing that Johns Creek offers, in my opinion, again, top two reasons. Number one is the social organization, where you have, again, people don't tell the stories because they don't detect that they're going to be received well. You have to have a receptive audience to tell a story. And that's what Johns Creek Veterans Association does. We provide a receptive audience for people to tell their stories because we like to hear them.
Well, it's a very good organization.
Oh, it's outstanding.
Anybody that's out there that had a relative or had a friend that served in Vietnam that was KIA, you can. This is the wall that traveled all over the United States. It's a 50% replica of the wall in Washington, D.C. It traveled all over the United States, and now it's come to rest in its permanent home in Johns Creek in Newtown Park. And you're invited anytime to come out, and they're going to be putting up a kiosk very shortly that you'll be able to, on a computer, find your relative or friend and find out where you go to or where their name is located on the wall. And we'll be adding something to it because of my feelings towards the women that haven't gotten credit for serving in Vietnam. And we'll be putting up a plaque to them shortly. And then there's always Peachtree Corners that has a very nice memorial. And always we want to keep in mind that you can go downtown. Right across the street from the Capitol is the Floyd Building, and it's the home of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And you can see the stories of some of the greatest Georgians that ever lived, and how proud we can be as Georgians to have so many heroes that did so much for our country and, gave of themselves one way or the other, whether they died in action or just the service that they've rendered to our country. And as veterans, or whatever the situation might be, they are there for you to take a look at and read about. And it's a great place to take your, I'd say, a little bit older kids, 12, 13, 14 years old, where they can really understand and read the information about the different heroes. And it's a great day to spend in Atlanta, Georgia, down at the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame.
Yep.
So, back to our guest, Bill Howell. And, okay, so you welcomed everybody back in the 173rd.
I sure did. I mean, that's one thing these guys really needed. Somebody at least acted like they cared about their arrival. And that's what I trained these guys in my squad to do. And believe me, I handpicked this. So they allowed me to handpick my team. And every one of these people were caring individuals. And they really were sensitive to the fact that these guys had just returned out of the jungles. They still had the mud in their boots. They were tired. They looked like crap. Some hadn't shaved because they were yanked right out of the field. Get on the plane, you're going back home. And there they arrived at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So we gave them a lot of support. Some people, again, it wasn't all peaches and fruit. Some of these guys in the phone banks were unable to contact their loved ones to come get them. They didn't have cars waiting for there was no cars in the parking lot. They were hoping that somebody, their loved ones next to kin, could come and pick them up at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, because they were all over the eastern side of the United States. And some soldiers could not get a hold of anyone. And I had to babysit these guys, make sure they're fed, cleaned up, and given a appropriate lodging in our base. We gave them the best lodging. It was meant for meant for NCOs. And our top sergeants, we gave those grunts the best of care. And it was a sad thing, though, like one soldier contacted his girlfriend, and he found out he didn't have a girlfriend anymore. So he called his mother, and his mother said, we have one car, between Dad and her, had one car, and they both had jobs. They need that one car to work. So I said, time to pass the hat, which I did among the squad, and get this guy a bus ticket back to Connecticut. And that's what the kind of care we gave them. But it was a rough bunch. They'd been through hell, and a lot of them were the ones that we didn't see were dead or in hospitals wounded. We only saw the survivors. And I appreciate the fact that, they all had guilt, the fact that all of a sudden they're home, and they knew all the soldiers that were still in Vietnam, all 200,000, from 400,000 to 200,000. And a lot of people had that guilt because I'm here, I'm alive, my duty's done, I'm going home, and their buddies are still back there.
Yeah, this
it's
is
tough.
This is something that we brought up before, is that I guess Vietnam, particularly when the guys were coming home and stuff, we realized, I think a lot of us had in mind, and I don't want to be misquoted or this be taken out of context, but in many ways, World War II and even Korea were quote unquote clean wars. You didn't have people setting booby traps for you every time you turned around. There's the enemy over there, and they're the ones in the purple hats or whatever, And no war is clean, but we had this, this saying ever since the Revolutionary War that, you stand up in your platoon or whatever, or company, and you fire a shot, then they fire a shot, you fire a shot. And it was like, and you knew your enemy, and you knew where they were. Vietnam, we had never, ever been in a situation like Vietnam that you reach down to pick up a can and it blows up in your hand. You reach down or you step on a wire and you have punji sticks coming through you.
Yep.
And it was the dirtiest, nastiest war
that was terrible.
we ever been in.
A colonel told me he'd been to Vietnam 3 times. He said the vast majority of our military efforts in Vietnam, all from 65 to 73, were met trying to find the enemy.
Mm-hmm. And
we're so desperate to find the enemy, we used these guys we made these guys walk point. You know how many people survive walking point?
Not many.
That's how desperate we were to find the enemy. That's what kind of war it was.
Yeah, and it was just and the stories, and we've always had quote unquote PTSD. Some call it shell shock. Some different terms.
War fatigue, battle fatigue.
Yeah, but PTSD coming back from Vietnam, and I still have friends that suffer from PTSD that they saw, again, war is hell. There's no pretty side of war under any circumstance, but in World War II and even in the Korean War, we didn't have the nastiness of the Vietnamese were brutally nasty.
Brutal.
And how does somebody tell you that he found his best friend in the platoon that had been, just literally skinned? And and you just, there was story after story after story after about the brutality of the Vietnamese, and even and we've had a number of POWs that the nastiness of, and you can't. How can humanity stoop that low to do those kind of things? And many of the booby traps that the Vietnamese designed were meant not to kill,
right,
but to injure, because they knew if a person was injured or he had just had his genitals blown off, that we were going to take care of him, and it cost more to take care of him than it did to kill him. And this is something else that I always do on this program, is that I think the bravest of the brave were the dust-off pilots.
Oh, absolutely.
And the nurses that would also jump on the dust-offs to go out and pick up the wounded and bring them back and give them care.
You talk about real heroes, Dave. You talk about real heroes.
The dust-off
pilots.
Yep. And,
unbelievable.
They and I've mentioned this many times as well, is that I had a real thing about the guys and the women that would claim that they wouldn't go, they wouldn't carry a weapon, and the ones that I've lost my train of thought. That would go but wouldn't carry a weapon, and they turned out being medics.
Yes,
and
plenty of medics.
They were conscientious objectors.
Yep, and they were very brave.
And they were very brave. Yes, without a doubt. And I have I begged forgiveness of what I thought of them at the time.
Mm-hmm, me too.
And yet they turned out to be the heroes of many battles.
I had one CO on my unit, and believe me, he came back a war hero.
I can believe it.
Wounded many times, dragging bodies back from the front line, as it were. Amazing what they did.
So,
but those dust-off pilots were an amazing bunch of guys.
That's that's what this whole show is about. Is honoring.
It is
honoring our vets, and
well, that's why I'm on. Not to honor me or my military service, to talk about what the guys were like in Vietnam. I hope I've given some people some additional flavor of what these guys were like, because I interviewed everybody I could talk to, hundreds, and I took copious notes about their experiences, because I knew they would never write them down or document them. So I had a scratch pad at all times with me, name, experiences, what they did, where they were, because I knew they would never share the stories with their loved ones. And just like my three favorite people, my best man brother, my two cousins who did multiple tours, they still don't talk about it.
Well, we ought to have them on. I'll get them to talk about it.
I hope you did, because I'm making partial luck. I keep convincing them that every birthday, every time their birthday happens, I bug them and says, this is the year that you're going to document your experiences, because you're getting old and you're getting forgetful.
Well, it's in some ways that maybe you ought to leave them alone, and that's their way of healing from it.
Eventually you have to. Yep. That's why they talk about the healing process. That's what we call the wall in Newtown Park in Johns Creek, the wall that heals. That's the name of the wall. It's no longer called the miniature Vietnam Wall or the traveling wall. It's the wall that heals. And how does it work? Well, when I walk to my best friend and I see his name, Joe Gambino, that heals because he died on his birthday in 1973 in an airplane over Cambodia. So I dedicate this program, Vietnam Stories, to Joe Gambino and my best friend here.
You know, I'm going to bring up a very touchy subject right now, and I wonder when and how and if anything will ever really be brought out about this. But Vietnam was one of the first wars or police actions, whatever you want to call it, but wars.
This is a war.
That started a trend that is really, in many ways, our military today, and that's contract labor.
Yep.
And a lot of folks don't realize that that is what, in many cases, has fought and saved us in the Middle East, is contract labor.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not recognized. They're in fact, they are, in many cases, and many of the contract labor are veterans of some war or the other. And they've volunteered, and they make a good living at it.
Oh, yes. Paid well.
But
to provide security, engineering, etc. Supply chain services.
I do wonder if they will ever be recognized as our, you know, just like Submarine Mike calls the silent, well, the Mariners, the submariners that were the silent warriors, but we also have and it's a sad scenario, but our contract labor can do some things that our military can't do because of people like Pelosi that have rules of engagement. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. You know, somebody pulls a gun on me and I've got a gun, I'm going to shoot. And we can't do it until we find out whether they're the enemy or not. Check their press passes. But, you know, I want to reach out to the contract labor folks and say thank you. And this is the first time we've had contract labor. We've had some folks on that were from Blackwater and others.
Oh, yes.
But, you know, we as a country have to stand up and take a position. And my position is at some point down the road, I hope that the contract labor folks are recognized for what they've contributed to our country. And it's not to belittle, I'm not belittling our military by any means. But, you know, I learned a long time ago, particularly at my size, that you don't go into a fight with your hands tied behind your back. And that's what our Congress and our previous presidents have done. And that's not right. And because of that, we've had to turn to and look at contract labor.
Yep.
And a lot of folks don't know that and don't appreciate it.
Nope.
But, you know, you do what you got to do.
Good point.
And I respect our president and that has called up and taken the lead where he should be. And when he's had to, he's called in the contract folks.
Yes, he has.
And interestingly enough, and I didn't know this, I thought it was basically all ground pounders, but it's not.
No.
The contract can be
the civil engineering is incredible. I know two civil engineers that have served in Saudi Arabia and Middle East. Paid well and shot at, threatened, but don't call them veterans and don't call them heroes. But they are.
So, you know, it's... there's nothing, like I said to begin with, there's nothing nice about war, and there never will be. And you know, it's I think the person that said war is hell, obviously had been there and done that.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I respect them all. Respect.
Oh yeah.
Everyone that's sworn to uphold our Constitution. And so, what else do we need to cover right quick? We got about 8 minutes to go.
Well, I told you my two main reasons why I love Johns Creek Veterans Association is number one, it's a receptive social group that people can tell stories that they can't tell or don't feel comfortable with talking to their family, friends, wives, etc. And that provides a nice platform for people who can finally talk and appreciate their stories. Number two, the thing I love about Johns Creek Veterans Association is we commemorate all patriotic days, military history days, and historic days in this country. And we commemorate that by having ceremonies, speakers, wreaths, etc., as formal as we can get, at our monuments in Johns Creek, Newtown Park. And it's called the Memorial Walk. And if you haven't been there, we invite you to attend or to walk our Memorial Walk. It was built largely due to the funds and efforts of Corey Davenport, our local leading politician here in Johns Creek. And we have monuments to every theater of war, starting from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert War, Gulf War, Afghanistan. And additionally, we have monuments to women in service, as you mentioned earlier, Dave, that we also honored last year on Women's Service Day. And we also have a flag for Purple Heart recipients. And that was a great ceremony we had last spring. And upcoming, we have it's September 18th, Friday, is the POW MIA Remembrance Day annually. And we commemorated last year with our color guard. This year it's ballooned, thanks to efforts of Rick White, into a large gathering, which will be held on Saturday, because these people, special guests that Rick has lined up, are unavailable on the day of Remembrance Day, Friday, September 18th. So we're going to celebrate this at the Newtown Park Amphitheater on September 19th, starting at 4 p.m. at the Monument for POW MIAs. And then we're going to proceed to our amphitheater, and this procession is going to be awesome. I mean, I don't use the word awesome lightly. Rick White has lined up a procession from the monuments 200 yards later to the amphitheater, consisting of our color guard, followed by the Marine Service League, who is going to do a 21-gun salute at the Wreath Lane, followed by POW MIA, not KIAs, but POW, former POWs, that he's invited, up to 4 of these: Bill Robinson, Wayne Waddell, Kevin Chaney, and last but not least, our speaker at Johns Creek Veterans Association 2 months ago, Lee Alice. And so there'll be at least 4 POWs in that procession. And then our veterans, members of JCVA, followed by the community who chooses to attend. And once we're at the amphitheater at 4:30, Saturday, September 19th, we'll have our POWs speak to us. And we'll also have the head of the POW MIA National League of Families, Joanne Walters, talk to us. So it'll be a nice occasion if you want to celebrate just being with veterans or to commemorate those lost POWs, KIAs. And at the latest count, we still have, thanks to Joanne Shirley and their DPAA and National League of POW Families, we have 1,586 soldiers in Vietnam, Southeast Asia right now that we are yet to find. They've recovered over 1,056, which is a good percentage considering 50 years have passed, 50 years or more. So they're still at it. They're still digging, and they're still working with the Vietnamese government, despite it being communist, and they're working with many parties through the UN to try to recover the remains of the loved ones. It's a great ceremony. So we invite you to attend Newtown Park ceremony, Saturday, September 19th at the Wall That Heals, and at our Monument POW MIA. It's going to be a good one.
It should be.
I invite you, Dave. I hope you'll be there, David.
I'm planning on it.
Since you live in Johns Creek, we expect to see you there. Rick White will be disappointed if you're not.
Well, I tell you, the other thing that folks should do, and we mention this frequently, is that you see somebody in uniform, I don't care what kind of uniform it is, first responders, whatever, let go of the mouse. Pardon me. No. Whatever the case might be, if you see a first responder or anybody else in uniform, thank them.
Yes.
And if it's in a situation that's comfortable, buy them a dinner, buy
There you
them a
go.
meal, buy them a drink,
There you
whatever
go.
the case might be. But they work for you, and they're not working for themselves. However, I must say, as I've been all three at one time or the other, the reward you get by helping somebody else is incredible. And we had a doctor who was in the other day doing one of our shows, and we were talking about the fact that obviously he got it a lot more than I ever have, but just you get the person, you get your patient to the hospital, and you see in their eyes they're saying thank you. And that's the same way with the military. And we're all brothers, and we've all seen and done. And those that served in Nam or served in the Middle East, they know it better than we do. So say thank you. That's the least you can do.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to be winding up here before long, and I really do. I'm having a contest with my IT guy over who's controlling the mouse, and I want to control the mouse,
Where's
as
the
a
mouse?
matter of fact. But Bill, I want to thank you, and as in many cases, will you come back and be our guest again and talk more about what you did and what JC's Veterans Association is doing. And we were talking about this the other day. We are losing a tremendous number of
yeah.
World War II veterans, and
And
now we're
Yep.
beginning to
Korean
lose
War.
Korean War, and now we're losing
Oh yeah, many.
many of the Vietnam veterans.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have to learn to deal with. And excuse me a second. Oops. Let go of the mouse. Well, I wanted, never mind. I had to get back into it.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, we have to keep supporting our veterans,
Yes.
and
Oh,
we
they
have
need-
to
they need it.
encourage our young folks to look at the military as their career and what they can do.
Yep.
It's a great organization. All branches are great. And the other thing, and we only have, well, it's time to go, as a matter of fact, or just about time to
It's-
go. One quick question. I'm sure you feel the same way. You meet some of the nicest people, and they become lifelong friends
Oh, absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
you meet in the military.
Yep.
And
I mean, first friend I had in the military, Ray Hill, I met in basic cadet training in 1968. I still look at Ray as a friend. Now he's teaching at Emory University, and Ray and I go back to 1969.
wow.
And in addition to my cousins and my best man brother, who tell their stories carefully.
Well, we want to thank everybody that has tuned in. We want to thank everybody that supports America's Web Radio and our veterans, and ask that you always be with us. And thank you for joining us, Bill. Thank you for
It's an
coming
honor to be on
over.
your show, Dave.
And this will be archiving this, and it will be up very shortly, probably at the end of the day. You'll be able to listen to it, or at least by tomorrow. So
Okay.
again, thank you, and we got more coming your way, folks. Stay tuned.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.